Imagine a world at its very beginning, where the earth is still fresh, and the memory of paradise lingers in the hearts of its first inhabitants. In this world, Adam, the very first human, walks the land with the weight of both hope and sorrow. He has tasted the sweetness of family and the bitterness of loss, for his beloved son Habil has been taken from him in a moment of jealousy and rage. The pain of losing a child is unlike any other, and Adam's heart aches with a grief that seems impossible to bear. Yet, in the midst of this darkness, a new light is destined to shine. Allah, in His infinite mercy, bestows upon Adam a new sonar gift, so precious that his very name, Sheath, means gift. This child is not just a replacement, but a sign of hope and a promise that goodness will endure even after tragedy. Sheath's birth brings comfort to Adam and Hawa, a gentle reminder that Allah's wisdom is always at work, even when the world feels broken. The arrival of Sheath is more than just the birth of a child. It is the beginning of a new chapter for humanity, one that carries the potential for healing, guidance, and the continuation of a noble legacy. From the earliest days of his life, Sheath is different. He is marked by a calm wisdom and a natural inclination toward righteousness. Adam, recognizing the special qualities in his son, takes great care to nurture him, sharing with him the knowledge and experiences that only the first human could possess. Sheath listens intently to his father's storious tales of the garden, of the angels, of the commands of Allah, and of the consequences of disobedience. He learns not just through words, but through the example of Adam's steadfast faith and resilience in the face of hardship. As Sheath grows, he becomes a source of comfort and strength for his father, easing the burden of loss and filling their home with a renewed sense of purpose. The bond between father and son is deep and unbreakable, forged in the fires of shared sorrow and hope. Sheath's character shines through in his actions. He is obedient, respectful, and always eager to learn. He absorbs the lessons of his father and internalizes the importance of worshipping Allah alone, never forgetting the mistakes of the past. Adam, seeing the purity of his son's heart, entrusts him with the responsibility of guiding their family and reminding them of their duty to their Creator. Sheath takes this role seriously, offering gentle reminders and wise counsel to his siblings, nephews, and the growing generations that follow. He becomes a pillar of guidance, a living example of what it means to be devoted to Allah and to uphold justice and unity among people. As the years pass, Sheath's influence only grows. He is not just a son, but a leader who brings people together and resolves disputes with fairness and compassion. Under his guidance, the descendants of Adam experience a period of harmony and righteousness, united by their shared faith and commitment to the path of truth. Sheath's wisdom and leadership are recognized by all, and his reputation as a prophet and messenger is firmly established. Through his words and actions, he keeps alive the memory of paradise and the lessons of the past, ensuring that the light of guidance continues to shine for generations to come. In Sheath, the legacy of Adam finds its truest expression, a legacy of faith, resilience, and unwavering devotion to Allah. As time moved forward and the children of Adam multiplied, the unity that once bound the first family began to show signs of strain. The world was still young, but already the seeds of division were being sown. Among Adam's sons, Habil, known to later generations as Cain, stood out for his restless spirit and turbulent heart. Unlike his brother Sheath, whose nature was gentle and whose faith was steadfast, Habil was marked by a simmering discontent. He carried within him a sense of pride and a hunger for more, never quite satisfied with what he had. This restlessness grew into a wedge that separated him from his family, and soon Habil made a decision that would change the course of history. He gathered his followers, those who shared his outlook and temperament, and left the mountainous regions where Adam and Sheath's people lived. They descended into the valleys and flatlands, seeking a new life far from the watchful eyes and wise counsel of their kin. This physical separation was more than just a change of scenery. It was the beginning of a deeper divide, one that would shape the destiny of their descendants for generations to come. The people of Sheath remained in the mountains, holding fast to the teachings of Adam and the worship of Allah. Their lives were simple, guided by the principles of justice, unity, and obedience to their Creator. In contrast, Qabil's group began to develop their own customs and ways of living, gradually drifting away from the path of righteousness. Allah, in His wisdom, instructed Sheath and his followers not to mix with those who had chosen a different way. This command was clear and purposeful, meant to protect the purity of faith and prevent the spread of corruption. The distinction between the two groups became more pronounced with each passing year. It was said that the men among Sheath's people were strikingly handsome, while the women were less so, and among Qabil's people, the opposite was true. These differences, though seemingly superficial, became markers of the growing distance between the two communities. The mountains and valleys were not just geographical features, they were symbols of the choices that each group had made and the consequences that would follow. But the story of humanity is never simple, and the forces of temptation are always at work. Shaitan, the eternal adversary, watched these developments with keen interest. He understood the human heart, its desires and weaknesses, and he saw an opportunity to sow further discord. Disguised as a young apprentice, Shaitan approached a blacksmith among Qabil's people. He offered his services, learning the craft of working with metal, but his true intentions were far more sinister. With cunning and patience, he began to fashion new objects, strange and wondrous instruments that no one had ever seen before. The first was a flute, its hollow body capable of producing enchanting sounds. Then came a drum, its steady beat echoing through the valley. Shaitan experimented with metal, creating a bugle that could fill the air with haunting notes. These inventions were more than mere novelties. They were tools designed to captivate the senses and distract the mind from higher purposes. The people of the valley were mesmerized. The sounds of the flute and drum were unlike anything they had ever heard, and soon gatherings formed around Shaitan as he played his instruments. Curiosity turned to excitement, and excitement to obsession. The music became the centerpiece of their social life, drawing people together in ways that were new and exhilarating. The rhythms and melodies awakened something within them, stirring emotions and desires that had lain dormant. As the gatherings grew larger and more frequent, the people began to lose sight of the teachings they had once known. The music became a gateway, opening the door to behaviors and attitudes that were foreign to their ancestors. Shaitan's plan was unfolding perfectly by introducing these new pleasures. He was leading the people step by step away from the path of righteousness. The allure of the music did not go unnoticed by those in the mountains. Some among Sheath's people, drawn by the mysterious sounds drifting up from the valley, found themselves curious about what was happening below. They ventured down, at first just to observe, but soon they were caught up in the excitement and energy of the gatherings. The boundaries that had once kept the two groups apart began to blur, and with each new encounter, the influence of Shaitan's innovations spread further. The music, the dancing, the mingling of men and women, these were the first cracks in the foundation of obedience and discipline that Adam and Sheath had worked so hard to build. What began as innocent curiosity quickly became something more, as the people found themselves swept up in a tide of temptation and forgetfulness. The world was changing, and with it, the hearts of its inhabitants. The stage was set for even greater challenges, as the struggle between guidance and temptation entered a new and dangerous phase. The gatherings in the valley, once simple occasions for music and novelty, began to take on a life of their own. The hypnotic sounds of the flute and drum, the laughter and excitement, the sense of freedom and discovery, these things drew more and more people from the mountains, especially the youth, who were eager for new experiences. At first, they came only to watch, standing at a distance, curious but cautious. But the pull of the music was irresistible. The melodies seemed to promise something more, something thrilling and unknown. As the young men from Sheath's people drew closer, they found themselves face to face with the women of Kabil's descendants, whose beauty was striking and whose manner was bold. The women, too, were intrigued by these newcomers, and soon a new kind of interaction began to unfold that was playful, flirtatious, and charged with a sense of possibility. What started as innocent curiosity quickly became something deeper. The music provided a rhythm, a backdrop for the mingling of men and women who had once lived separate lives. The gatherings became more elaborate, with people dressing up, displaying their beauty, and seeking to attract attention. The boundaries that had once kept the two groups apart began to dissolve, replaced by a new culture of openness and celebration. The valley echoed with laughter, song, and the sounds of feet moving in time to the music. For many, it felt like liberation, a chance to break free from old restrictions and embrace a new way of living. But beneath the surface, something profound was changing. The values that had guided the first generation's modesty, restraint, obedience to Allah were slowly being replaced by a focus on pleasure, excitement, and self-expression. As the gatherings grew in size and frequency, the sense of community that had once defined Adam's descendants began to shift. The music and dancing became the center of social life, and with them came new temptations. The natural attraction between men and women, once carefully guarded, now found expression in ways that had never been seen before. The first glances became conversations, the first conversations became laughter, and soon the first touches and embraces followed. The valley, once a place of simple living, became a stage for the unfolding drama of human desire. The people were swept up in a current of emotion and excitement, barely noticing how far they had drifted from the teachings of their ancestors. The gatherings became parties, and the parties became celebrations of everything new and forbidden. The music, once a novelty, became a necessity, a way to escape, to forget, to lose oneself in the moment. It was in this environment that the first collective sin took root. The boundaries of modesty and restraint, already weakened by curiosity and excitement, finally gave way. Acts that had once been unthinkable became commonplace as men and women engaged in relationships outside the bonds of marriage. The first instances of Zina, adultery and fornication occurred not in secret, but in the open, as part of the new culture that had taken hold in the valley. What had begun as a simple gathering for music and entertainment had become a breeding ground for temptation and sin. The people, caught up in the thrill of the moment, failed to see the consequences of their actions. The sense of shame and guilt that might once have stopped them was drowned out by the music and the laughter, by the sense of belonging and excitement that the gatherings provided. Shaitan's plan had worked perfectly. By introducing music and celebration, he had created an environment where sin could flourish not as an isolated act, but as a collective experience. The first collective sin marked a turning point in the history of humanity. No longer were transgressions the actions of a few individuals. Now, entire groups participated together, encouraging one another and normalizing what had once been forbidden. The valley became a place where the old rules no longer applied, where the pursuit of pleasure and excitement took precedence over obedience and discipline. The people of the mountains, once steadfast in their faith, found themselves drawn into this new way of life, unable to resist the pull of the music and the promise of something more. As the culture of the valley spread, the sense of right and wrong became blurred. The teachings of Adam and Sheath, the warnings about the dangers of temptation, were forgotten or ignored. The people convinced themselves that there was nothing wrong with what they were doing, that the old rules were outdated and unnecessary. The gatherings became larger, the parties more extravagant, and the sins more frequent. The valley, once a place of promise, became a symbol of humanity's capacity for both creativity and self-destruction. The music that had once brought people together now served as a reminder of how far they had fallen, how easily they had been led astray. Yet, even as the collective sin took hold, there remained those who remembered the teachings of their ancestors. Sheath, steadfast and wise, continued to warn his people, urging them to return to the path of righteousness. He reminded them of the consequences of disobedience, of the importance of worshipping Allah alone and living lives of modesty and restraint. But his voice was often drowned out by the music and the laughter, by the excitement of the gatherings and the thrill of the forbidden. The struggle between guidance and temptation became the defining challenge of the age, a test that would shape the destiny of all who lived in those early days. The story of the valley and its people became a lesson for all generations, reminder of how easily the heart can be led astray, and how important it is to hold fast to the truth, even when the world seems determined to forget. Through all the changes and temptations that swept across the land, Sheath remained a steadfast beacon of guidance and hope. He watched as the world around him shifted, as the values he had inherited from Adam were challenged by new desires and distractions. Yet, he did not waver. With patience and wisdom, he continued to call his people back to the path of righteousness, reminding them of their origins, of the trust that Allah had placed in their family, and of the consequences that awaited those who strayed too far. His words were filled with compassion, but also with urgency, for he understood the gravity of the moment. He saw how easily hearts could be swayed, how quickly a community could lose its way when the foundations of faith were neglected. Even as the gatherings in the valley grew louder and the allure of music and celebration became more powerful, Sheath's presence was a constant reminder that there was another way away, rooted in obedience, humility, and devotion to Allah. Sheath's leadership was not just about words, it was about example. He lived a life of integrity, treating others with fairness and kindness, resolving disputes with wisdom, and ensuring that justice prevailed among his people. He was a source of comfort for those who struggled, a guide for those who were lost, and a protector for those who were vulnerable. His home became a place of learning and reflection, where the young and old alike could come to seek advice and find reassurance. The respect he commanded was not born of fear, but of love and admiration. People saw in him the embodiment of the values that Adam had cherished, and many found the strength to resist temptation simply by following his example. Even as the world changed, there remained a core of believers who clung to the teachings of Sheath, determined to preserve the legacy of faith that had been entrusted to them. As the years passed and Sheath grew older, he began to think about the future. He knew that his time on earth was limited and that the challenges facing his people would not end with his passing. With great care, he prepared his children and grandchildren for the responsibilities they would inherit. Among his many sons, one stood out for his piety and wisdom, Enos. Sheath recognized in Enos the same qualities that Adam had seen in him: a deep sense of responsibility, a love for truth, and a commitment to justice. Before his death, Sheath gathered his family and entrusted the mission of guidance to Enos, charging him with the task of leading the community and preserving the teachings of their ancestors. This moment was both solemn and hopeful, a passing of the torch that ensured the continuity of faith and leadership for generations to come. Enos accepted this responsibility with humility and determination. He understood the weight of the trust that had been placed in him, and he dedicated himself to upholding the legacy of Adam and Sheath. Under his guidance, the community found renewed strength and purpose. Enos was a wise and compassionate leader, always seeking to unite his people and resolve conflicts with fairness. He continued the tradition of teaching and reminding, ensuring that the lessons of the past were never forgotten. The mission did not end with Enos. It was passed down through the generations, from father to son, each leader chosen for his integrity and devotion. Kenan, Mahalalel, and others followed in this noble line, each contributing to the preservation and growth of the community. From this lineage, a remarkable legacy began to unfold. The descendants of Sheath became known not just for their piety, but for their role as the bearers of prophecy. It was from this family that most of the prophets would emerge, each one a guiding light for their people, each one a link in the unbroken chain that stretched back to Adam himself. The story of Sheath and his descendants became a testament to the power of faith and the importance of steadfast leadership. Even as the world around them changed, even as new challenges arose and old values were tested, the line of Sheath remained true to its purpose. The prophets who came from this lineage would go on to shape the course of human history, calling people back to the worship of Allah, reminding them of their true purpose, and offering hope in times of darkness. The journey of Sheath and his descendants is a story of resilience and renewal. It is a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming temptation and widespread change, there is always a path back to truth. The legacy of Adam, carried forward by Sheath, Enos, and those who followed, is a legacy of hopier promise that guidance will never be lost as long as there are those willing to uphold it. Through their example, the world learned that faith is not just a matter of belief, but of action, of leadership, and of unwavering commitment to what is right. The story continues, echoing through the generations, inspiring all who hear it to seek the light, to hold fast to their values, and to remember the trust that was placed in humanity from the very beginning.